Thomas Reed stood at his workstation in NASA's Advanced Propulsion Laboratory, his attention fixed on the holographic display of his latest engine design. At 32, he had already revolutionized spacecraft propulsion systems twice, earning him a reputation as one of Earth's most innovative aerospace engineers. The soft blue glow of the hologram reflected off his wire-rimmed glasses as he adjusted minute details of the quantum thrust matrix. "Mr. Reed?" The lab's intercom crackled with unusual urgency. "Your presence is required in the director's office immediately." Thomas glanced at his watch, 9:47 p.m. Most of the facility had cleared out hours ago, leaving only the usual night shift personnel. He saved his work and made his way through the sterile corridors, his footsteps echoing against polished floors. The scene that greeted him in Director Wilson's office stopped him in his tracks. Alongside the elderly director stood three figures that defied earthly description. Their skin held an opalescent quality that seemed to shift colors in the light, while their eyes, entirely silver with no visible pupils, regarded him with undisguised interest. The tallest of the three stepped forward. Her presence commanded attention, not just from her height but from an aura of authority that seemed to bend the very air around her. "Thomas Reed," she spoke, her voice carrying musical undertones that no human vocal cords could produce. "I am High Counselor Celine of the Nyx Empire. We have been watching your work with great interest." Thomas's analytical mind kicked into overdrive, processing everything from their advanced biotechnology to the implications of their presence. "You've been monitoring Earth's technological development," he stated rather than asked. A slight smile crossed Celine's ethereal features. "Precisely. But more specifically, we have been monitoring you." Director Wilson cleared his throat nervously. "Mr. Reed, the High Counselor and her delegation have made Earth an unusual offer. One that specifically concerns you. Our civilization has reached a crucial juncture," Celine continued, her silver eyes never leaving Thomas. "We have achieved technological mastery beyond what you can imagine, but we face a crisis of innovation. Our people have become too linear in their thinking, too bound by tradition. We need fresh perspectives, minds that can see beyond established paradigms." Thomas crossed his arms, his expression thoughtful. "And you think I can provide that perspective?" "We know you can. Your quantum propulsion theories? They parallel developments it took our civilization centuries to achieve. You reached these conclusions with far fewer resources and in a fraction of the time. What exactly are you proposing?" Celine gestured, and a holographic display materialized in the center of the room, showing a magnificent city that seemed to be built from crystalline structures and living light. "We propose an exchange. You will come to Nyxus as our honored guest, sharing your insights and helping us break through our technological stagnation. In return, Earth will receive access to clean energy technology that will solve your climate crisis. And if I decline? Then we leave, and Earth continues on its current path." Celine's tone held no threat, just simple fact. "But consider this, you've spent your life pushing boundaries, seeking to expand human understanding of the universe. We're offering you the opportunity to expand that understanding beyond anything you've dreamed possible." Thomas studied the holographic city, his mind racing with possibilities. He thought of his empty apartment, of the decades he'd spent pursuing knowledge at the expense of personal connections. Here was an opportunity to make that sacrifice mean something more. "The catch?" he asked, knowing there had to be more. Celine's expression shifted subtly. "Our society values deep connections between minds capable of advancing our civilization. If you accept, you would be expected to integrate fully into our culture. This includes..." She paused, choosing her words carefully, "the possibility of a permanent alliance between our peoples through you." Thomas's eyebrows rose as he decoded the diplomatic language. "You're talking about marriage." "A joining of minds and purposes," Celine corrected. "Though your human terminology is not entirely inaccurate. The room fell silent as Thomas processed this information. His logical mind warred with the sheer improbability of the situation. Yet beneath that, a spark of excitement ignited. How many humans had dreamed of exploring the stars? Of encountering advanced civilizations? Now he stood on the brink of that very opportunity. "When do we leave?" he asked finally. Celine's smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed to shimmer like opals. "Tomorrow at dawn. I suggest you put your affairs in order tonight." As Thomas left the office that night, his mind was already racing with preparations. He had no family to notify, his parents were long gone, and his work had always been his closest companion. What he didn't notice was the way Celine's silver eyes followed his departure, or the subtle smile that played across her features. Unknown to Thomas, his acceptance had set in motion events that would change not just his life, but the course of two civilizations. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see what would unfold when human ingenuity met alien tradition. In his apartment that night, as he packed the few belongings he would take, Thomas wondered if he had made the right choice. But as he looked up at the night sky through his window, he knew that some opportunities were worth any risk. Tomorrow would bring the beginning of an adventure beyond anything in human history, and he would be at its heart. The night passed quickly as Earth prepared to bid farewell to one of its brightest minds, while somewhere in the vast expanse of space, an alien civilization awaited the arrival of the human who might be their salvation. The Nixian capital ship defied everything Thomas knew about physics. As they traveled through what Celine called fold space, he spent hours in the ship's observation deck, documenting the impossible phenomena surrounding them. The vessel itself seemed alive, its corridors shifting and adapting to its occupants' needs, its walls pulsing with what he would later learn was crystalline biotechnology. "You're adapting well," Celine's voice came from behind him. She had shed her formal diplomatic attire for what appeared to be a more casual ensemble, though even casual Nixian clothing looked like liquid starlight given form. Thomas barely glanced up from his tablet, where he was sketching theoretical models. "This method of propulsion, it's not just about folding space, is it? You're manipulating the fundamental forces that bind reality together." Celine settled beside him, her silver eyes studying his calculations. "Most humans we've encountered respond to fold space travel with fear or awe. You seek to understand it. Understanding is how humans overcome fear." Thomas finally looked up at her. "Though I have to admit, awe is still very much present." A subtle shift in the air around them suggested Celine was pleased. Thomas had begun to recognize how Nixians communicated not just through words, but through subtle manipulations of the energy fields that seemed to surround them naturally. "The High Council awaits our arrival," she said after a moment. "They're eager to begin working with you." Thomas set down his tablet. "About that, we never really discussed the details of this arrangement. What exactly does integration into your culture entail?" Celine's expression became unreadable. "Our society functions on principles of resonance, compatibility between minds and energies. When we identified you as a potential participant in our civilization, it wasn't just about your intellectual capabilities. You're saying I have some kind of compatible energy signature? More than that. You have what we call harmonic potential. It's extremely rare, especially in non-Nixians." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "The Council believes you could be key to solving problems beyond just our technological stagnation." Thomas felt a familiar tension headache building. "Such as? Our species is facing an evolutionary crossroads. We've become too perfect. Too stable. We need the chaos factor that humans like you represent." She turned to face him fully. "The proposed alliance between us isn't just political, Thomas. It's biological." The implications hit him like a physical force. "You want to introduce human genetic variables into your population. Through me." "Through us," Celine corrected softly. The High Council didn't just send any representative to Earth. They sent me because we have the highest resonance compatibility ever recorded between a Nixian and a human. Thomas stood abruptly, pacing the observation deck. So this whole thing, the technology exchange, the cultural integration, it's all just an elaborate breeding program? No. Celine's voice carried an edge he hadn't heard before. The exchange is genuine. Your insights are invaluable to us. But yes, there are additional hopes for what our connection might mean for both our species. Thomas ran a hand through his dark hair, his mind racing. And if I refuse this aspect of the arrangement? You won't be forced. Celine rose with fluid grace. But I think you'll find that resonance isn't something that can be ignored forever. Even now, you feel it, don't you? The pull between us? The way your thoughts seem clearer when we're in proximity? He wanted to deny it, but she was right. Since their first meeting, he'd noticed how his mind seemed to operate on a higher level around her. Ideas flowed more freely, connections formed more readily. The High Council chambers, she continued, are designed to amplify natural resonances. When we arrive, you'll understand more clearly what I mean. As if on cue, the ship shuddered slightly, and through the observation window, Thomas watched as they emerged from fold space into orbit around a planet that seemed to be made of crystal and light. Nixis. Welcome to my world, Celine said softly. The planetary defense systems acknowledged their ship with pulses of rainbow light, creating a corridor through which they began their descent. Thomas watched in fascination as the crystalline spires of the capital city grew closer, their surfaces refracting sunlight in patterns that he suddenly realized were actually data transmissions. Your civilization doesn't just use technology, he breathed in understanding. You've evolved alongside it. Become one with it. Yes. Celine stepped closer, and Thomas felt that familiar clarity strengthen. And now you're here to help us take the next step in that evolution. As their ship docked in a structure that seemed to be grown rather than built, Thomas felt the weight of expectations settling on his shoulders. He hadn't just stepped into another world, he'd stepped into the middle of an evolutionary paradigm shift that could change two species forever. The real question was he ready for what that meant? The council chambers await, Celine gestured toward the ship's exit. Are you prepared to begin? Thomas straightened his shoulders, his scientific curiosity overriding his apprehension. Lead the way. As they walked together through corridors that hummed with living technology, neither mentioned how perfectly their steps matched, or how the ship's crystalline surfaces sang in harmony as they passed. Some truths, it seemed, didn't need to be spoken aloud. The High Council chambers were unlike anything Thomas had imagined. The vast circular room was a living symphony of light and crystal, its walls continuously shifting in response to the emotional and mental energies of those within. After 3 months on Nixis, he had grown accustomed to many of their technological wonders, but this place still took his breath away. The quantum resonance readings are clear, Council member Theron's voice echoed through the chamber. His opalescent skin had a bluish tinge that Thomas had learned indicated deep concern. The fabric of fold space is becoming unstable. Our primary transport corridors will collapse within the year. Thomas stood before the council alongside Celine, their shoulders nearly touching. He could feel the low hum of energy between them, stronger now than ever. The past months of working together had created a connection that went beyond mere resonance compatibility. Show me the data, Thomas requested. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing complex patterns of quantum deterioration. He studied them intently, his mind already racing with possibilities. Our attempts to stabilize the corridors have failed, another council member added. Without these routes, our civilization will fragment. We cannot maintain our empire across such vast distances without fold space travel. Thomas stepped forward, manipulating the holographic display with practiced ease. You're approaching this from the wrong direction, he said, earning surprised looks from several council members. Only Celine showed no surprise, she had grown used to his unconventional insights. "Explain," she encouraged, her silver eyes intense. "You're trying to force stability back into a system that's naturally moving toward chaos. But chaos isn't always the enemy." His fingers danced through the hologram, rearranging the quantum patterns. "What if instead of fighting the instability, we use it?" The chamber hummed with increased energy as the council members leaned forward. Thomas felt Celine's presence behind him, her energy field harmonizing with his in a way that sharpened his thoughts to crystal clarity. "On Earth, we have a concept called controlled chaos theory. In some systems, a certain level of chaos actually creates new forms of stability." He highlighted specific points in the quantum matrix. "Your fold space corridors are becoming unstable because they're too rigid. They need to breathe." "Impossible," Theron objected. "The corridors must maintain precise quantum alignments or they collapse entirely. Not if we redesign them to be adaptive rather than static." Thomas turned to face the council. "Your civilization evolved alongside your technology, right? So let your transport systems evolve too." He felt Celine's sudden understanding through their resonance link. "A living fold space network," she breathed. "One that can adapt and heal itself like biological systems." "Exactly." Thomas expanded the holographic display to show his concept. "We combine Onyxian biotechnology with elements of quantum chaos theory. Instead of fixed corridors, we create a dynamic network that responds to the natural fluctuations in spacetime." The council chamber erupted in discussion, streams of data flowing across its crystalline walls as the members analyzed his proposal. Thomas felt a gentle touch on his arm and turned to find Celine watching him with an expression he had never seen before. "You continue to surprise me," she said softly. "This solution, it's so perfectly balanced between our ways and yours. Order and chaos in harmony." Thomas was suddenly very aware of how close they were standing, of how their energy fields had merged without either of them noticing. "Like us," he suggested quietly. Before Celine could respond, a violent tremor shook the chamber. Warning glyphs flashed across the walls in angry red patterns. "Multiple fold space corridors are collapsing," Theron announced, his skin now almost white with alarm. "The degradation is accelerating exponentially." Thomas rushed back to the holographic display, Celine at his side. The quantum patterns were shifting faster than anyone had predicted, cascading failures spreading through the network like cracks in ice. "We need to implement the adaptive network now," Thomas insisted. "Before the whole system fails." "The risk," one council member began, "is nothing compared to the certainty of collapse if we don't act," Celine cut in, her authority silencing all objections. She turned to Thomas. "What do you need?" He met her silver eyes, seeing in them complete trust. "Access to your primary fold space generators. And you. Our resonance might be the key to stabilizing the initial transformation." The chamber fell silent. What Thomas was suggesting was unprecedented, using the natural resonance between a human and a Nyxian to reshape the fundamental structure of fold space itself. Celine didn't hesitate. "Done. Council is adjourned. Thomas and I will proceed to the quantum core immediately." As they hurried through the crystalline corridors of the capital, their steps perfectly matched, Thomas felt the weight of two civilizations resting on their shoulders. But with Celine beside him, their energies intertwined, he had never been more certain of anything in his life. The universe itself seemed to be pushing them together, and perhaps that was exactly what both their species needed, a perfect balance of chaos and order, of human intuition and Nyxian precision, of heart and mind joined in harmony. The quantum core of Nyxus thrummed with raw power, its crystalline chamber stretching hundreds of meters in every direction. This was the heart of their civilization, the nexus point from which all fold space corridors originated. Now it pulsed with angry red warnings as the network continued to deteriorate. The containment fields are barely holding, Thomas observed, studying the holographic readouts floating around them. We have maybe an hour before total system collapse. Celine's hands danced over the control interface, her movements precise and graceful even in crisis. If the network fails completely, we lose contact with over 300 colonial worlds. Millions of lives depend on these corridors. Thomas stepped onto the central platform, feeling the quantum energies washing over him like waves. Then let's make sure that doesn't happen. He reached out his hand to Celine. Ready to rewrite the laws of physics? She took his hand without hesitation, and immediately their resonance surged. The chamber's crystals sang in response, their light shifting to match the harmonious frequency between human and Nixian. The Council thinks this is impossible, Celine said softly, even as their combined energy began to interface with the quantum core's systems. They believe the chaos of human consciousness can't possibly stabilize fold space. Thomas smiled, squeezing her hand. Good thing we know better. He closed his eyes, focusing on the connection between them. Begin primary sequence. The air around them came alive with streams of data and quantum calculations. Thomas felt Celine's consciousness brush against his through their resonance link, their thoughts merging into something greater than either of them alone. Initiating fold space reconfiguration, Celine announced. Thomas, this will be like nothing we've ever attempted. The energy required will come from our resonance, he completed her thought. That's what they've been missing all along. The stability doesn't come from rigid control. It comes from harmony between different forces. As if in response to his words, the quantum core's energy output began to spike. Warning klaxons blared as the power levels exceeded all safety parameters. But Thomas and Celine held firm, their joined hands becoming the conduit through which a new kind of fold space network would be born. Through their resonance link, Thomas shared his vision of adaptive corridors, showing Celine how to weave chaos theory into the very fabric of spacetime. She, in turn, guided his understanding of Nixian quantum mechanics, their knowledge merging into something entirely new. Multiple corridor failures detected, an automated system announced. Cascade collapse imminent. Now, Thomas said firmly. Release the old protocols. Let it break down completely. Celine's grip on his hand tightened. If we're wrong. We're not. His confidence flowed through their link. Trust what's between us. That's the template for everything else. With a deep breath, Celine entered the final command sequence. Around them, the existing fold space network began to dissolve, centuries of carefully maintained order giving way to calculated chaos. The quantum core's crystal chamber resonated with energy patterns never before seen on Nixus. For one terrifying moment, everything hung in the balance. Then, like a phoenix rising from quantum ashes, new patterns began to emerge. The angry red warnings faded to peaceful blue as a living network of fold space corridors formed itself, adapting and flowing like rivers of light between the stars. By the ancestors, Celine breathed, watching the new network stabilize. It's beautiful. Thomas opened his eyes, taking in the transformed quantum patterns. Like a neural network made of spacetime itself. He turned to Celine, still holding her hand. Your people were so focused on maintaining perfect order that they forgot the power of natural patterns. And humans? She asked, her silver eyes meeting his with an intensity that had nothing to do with quantum physics. We spend so much time fighting chaos that we sometimes miss the patterns hidden within it. He reached up with his free hand, gently touching her opalescent cheek. Until something comes along that helps us see them clearly. The quantum core hummed contentedly around them, its new adaptive networks spreading across the empire. But in that moment, neither Thomas nor Celine was paying attention to the readings. The resonance between them had grown into something far beyond mere compatibility, it had become a bridge between two ways of seeing the universe. The Council will want a full report, Celine said softly, making no move to step away. "Let them wait," Thomas replied. "I think we've earned a moment to appreciate what we've created." As if in agreement, the crystal chamber's light shifted to a warm gold, bathing them in a glow that matched the harmony of their joined energy fields. They had done more than save the Fold space network. They had proven that the future belonged not to order or chaos alone, but to the beautiful complexity that arose when both were allowed to dance together. 1 year after the quantum core transformation, the grand observatory of Nixis sparkled under twin suns. Thomas stood at its apex, watching ships traverse the living Fold space corridors that now connected the Empire. Each pathway shimmered with its own unique quantum signature, adapting and shifting like celestial rivers. The latest reports from the outer colonies arrived, Celine's voice carried through their resonance link before she even entered the room. Their connection had grown stronger over the months, evolving into something that even the oldest Nixian scholars couldn't fully explain. "Let me guess," Thomas smiled as she joined him at the observation window. "Another successful adaptation?" "Better." Her silver eyes sparkled with excitement. "The network is developing new pathways on its own. It's not just adapting anymore, it's growing. Learning. Creating connections we never imagined possible." Thomas nodded, unsurprised. "Just like the connection between our species." The past year had seen unprecedented changes in both human and Nixian society. The success of their quantum resonance experiment had opened doors that neither civilization had known existed. Earth now had its first embassy on Nixis, while Nixian cultural exchanges had begun transforming human understanding of science and consciousness. "The High Council is ready to proceed with the next phase," Celine said softly, her hand finding his. "If you're certain." Thomas turned to face her fully. The formal robes she wore as High Counselor shimmed with living light, but it was her natural radiance that still took his breath away. "I've never been more certain of anything." They had spent months preparing for this moment, the first official joining ceremony between a human and a Nixian. It would be more than a marriage in either species' understanding of the term. Their resonance would be formally synchronized, creating a permanent quantum bond that would serve as a template for future human-Nixian partnerships. "There are still those who oppose this," Celine reminded him, though her tone held no worry. "They believe too much change too quickly will destabilize both our societies. Like trying to maintain rigid control over Fold space." Thomas raised an eyebrow, making her laugh. "Change isn't the enemy. It's the only constant in the universe. The trick is learning to change harmoniously." Around them, the observatory's crystals hummed in agreement, their frequencies automatically adjusting to match the resonance between human and Nixian. This too was new, their technology was learning to bridge the gap between species just as they had. "The ceremony begins at sunset," Celine said, her free hand tracing patterns of light in the air between them. "The quantum core will amplify our resonance across the entire network. Every colony, every world in the Empire will feel the moment our patterns synchronize permanently." "Nervous?" Thomas asked, though their connection told him she wasn't. "Excited," she corrected. "We're not just joining two lives or even two species. We're proving that the next step in evolution isn't about becoming more perfect or more ordered. It's about finding harmony in diversity." Thomas pulled her closer, their energy fields merging naturally. "I never thought I'd find my life's purpose in an alien empire. And I never imagined that the solution to our stagnation would come in the form of a brilliant human who sees chaos as a gift rather than a threat." Celine's lips curved in a smile that made the crystals around them pulse with joy. As the twin suns began their descent toward the horizon, Thomas and Celine stood together at the threshold of a new era. Below them, the capital city prepared for a celebration that would be remembered for generations. The quantum network sparkled with anticipation, its living pathways seeming to dance in the fading light. "Ready to change the universe?" Thomas asked, offering his arm in a gesture that blended Earth custom with Nixian formality. Selene took it, their resonance singing between them. "With you? Always." As they made their way to the ceremony chamber, their steps perfectly matched and their hearts beating in quantum harmony, both knew that this was more than just a joining of two beings. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the story of consciousness itself, a proof that love, like the universe they had helped reshape, thrived best when order and chaos found their perfect balance. The stars themselves seemed to shine brighter that evening, as if celebrating the truth that Thomas and Selene had discovered, that the greatest adventures, the most profound discoveries, and the deepest connections often come not from fighting the unknown, but from embracing it with an open heart and a curious mind. In the end, it wasn't just about saving an empire or bridging two species. It was about proving that the most beautiful patterns in existence emerge when different worlds dare to dance together in harmony. The end.